Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here today to sort through, well, a pretty significant pile of insights. If you've gathered everything from ancient thinkers to um, modern motivational gurus.
That's right.
And our goal is to really boil it all down to extract maybe something like a core operating manual for, living a truly well-lived life.
It's quite a mix of sources, isn't it? Spanning centuries, different fields.
It really is. It kind of reminds me of that funny line from Ken Hubbard, the old newspaper humorist. He said colleges should spread out the really important stuff over 4 years instead of saving it all up for the very end.
Yeah. And isn't that often how it feels? You get the technical skills, the degree, but the real wisdom on how to use it all, how to live, that sometimes feels like it comes later or all at once.
Exactly. So we've got all this really important stuff collected right here.
And our mission, I think, is to try and synthesize it, to find the connections between these, well, seemingly disparate pieces of advice. We're looking for the underlying principles, the system, if you will, that defines success and fulfillment, however you frame that for yourself.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating is how when you lay it all out, these diverse ideas seem to cluster around three main pillars, three big themes.
Okay.
First, we're going to explore what we're calling the geography of opportunity. Basically, well, where do you actually find success? Is it out there somewhere or closer than you think?
Interesting frame.
Geography.
Yeah. Then second, we'll dive into the ethics of influence and the moral self. How does the way we interact in public, the way we try to persuade others, how does that shape our own character?
Right, the connection between the outer and the inner.
Exactly. And then finally, the third part is about the power of internal will and resilience. This is really about the inner work, the non-negotiable stuff you need inside to handle the first two effectively.
The foundation, perhaps?
Could be. So let's start digging in.
So this first part, the geography of opportunity. We're kicking it off with a really striking idea from Russell H. Conwell's famous lecture, Acres of Diamonds.
Ah, yes. A classic. Delivered thousands of times, apparently.
Thousands. And his core idea is, well, it's almost shocking in its simplicity. He argues that the opportunity to get rich, to achieve great wealth, isn't somewhere else. It's right here, wherever here is for you.
Locally, yeah, he was incredibly direct about it. Speaking in Philadelphia, he'd say something like, "The opportunity to get rich is here, within the reach of almost every man and woman who hears me speak tonight."
And I mean just what I say. No ambiguity there.
Not at all. And he wasn't just trying to be inspiring in a vague way. He apparently used to say that unless some people in the audience actually got richer because of his talk, he'd wasted his time.
Wow. So it demands you actually accept it as true?
Right.
Like, right now. You're basically standing on your own diamond mine.
That's the premise. You have to buy into it fully.
Yeah.
And this is where it gets really interesting, I think, because he brings a strong sense of morality into making money.
Right. It's not just about accumulation for its own sake.
No, not at all. He actually called, honestly, earning riches a Christian and godly duty, which is, a pretty sharp turn from a purely secular view of capitalism.
So making money becomes a moral imperative. If you can.
If you can do it honestly, yes. His view was that if you have the talent or the means to create wealth by serving others, you actually have a responsibility to do it, because that wealth can then be used for good.
But he was careful to draw a line,
Yeah.
wasn't he? It wasn't money itself that was the problem.
Exactly. He was very clear about that. The evil wasn't wealth, it was the love of money. And he defined that very specifically as idolatry, as hoarding money, hiding it, refusing to put it to work where it could benefit people.
So letting capital stagnate, basically. That's the moral failure.
Yes, because he saw a direct, almost transactional link between wealth and service. The only legitimate way to earn money, in his view, was by providing things, services, products that your community genuinely needed and found useful. And therefore, the amount of money you earned, your wealth, would be in direct proportion to the value of the service you provided. You get paid, essentially, for solving other people's problems.
The bigger the problem you solve, or the more people you serve.
The greater the potential reward. It becomes this royal road to great wealth, as he put it, but it's paved with service.
That focus on local needs, on solving immediate problems, it actually leads quite nicely into more modern ideas about goals, doesn't it? If Conwell tells us where to look for opportunity,
then someone like Earl Nightingale tells us how to look.
right, with a clear goal in mind. Nightingale's definition of success is fascinating. It's not about a bank balance. He called it progressively realizing a worthy ideal.
That phrase, progressively realizing, it's so dynamic. It's not about arriving somewhere. It's about the journey towards something meaningful.
Yeah. And under that definition, A successful person is just anyone who is deliberately doing a job they chose to do on purpose.
It really strips away the mystique, doesn't it? Takes away luck and focuses purely on intention. And that worthy ideal could be anything: running a fantastic local bakery, inventing something useful, or even, creating a harmonious family life.
Nightingale believed that this was the secret sauce, the so-called magic touch some people seem to have. It wasn't magic at all.
It was just goals. Clear, defined goals. He argued that's the real difference between someone who works hard for years but doesn't really get anywhere specific and someone who seems to achieve everything they set out to do.
Clarity and focus.
And persistence. He didn't just leave it there either. He actually laid out what he called the price of success.
Okay, what did that involve?
Well, first you have to accept that core idea. You become what you think about most of the time. Then you need to use your imagination actively. You need courage, which he defines as concentrating on your goal every single day.
Discipline too.
Absolutely. He stressed saving 10% of everything you earn. And then, crucially, akanotiran. Ideas are worthless, he said, unless you act on them immediately and consistently.
He even had a practical exercise for this, right? The 30-day test.
Yeah, it's quite simple, really. Write down one goal, just one, but make it clear and specific. Could be about money, could be a better home, could be that harmonious family.
And then?
Review it several times a day, morning, noon, night, for 30 straight days. The idea is to force that goal to become the dominant thought in your mind.
So your actions just naturally start to align with it.
That's the theory. You're conditioning yourself for success, in a way.
This intense focus, both geographically local like Conwell and mentally focused like Nightingale, really underscores the potential danger of always looking elsewhere for your big break.
Conwell had a great story about that, didn't he? The professor from Massachusetts.
Oh, right. The young man who got offered a professorship. And it came as a raise, a significant one, from something like $15 to $45.
A huge jump back then.
Huge. But apparently the size of the raise made him think, well, if they're offering me that much more, my brain must be worth even more. Too valuable for just $45 a week.
So instead of taking the local opportunity, the service right there,
he heads off to California, chasing gold and silver mines. Convinced his true value couldn't possibly be recognized or rewarded in his small town.
And found nothing, presumably.
That was Conwell's point. That urge to look far away, to seek validation or prestige somewhere else that can blind you to the diamonds right under your feet.
It's interesting how that connects to a much later piece of advice from a totally different source, Kurt Vonnegut.
Ah, yes, the advice to his friend Jerome Klinkowitz.
Right. Klinkowitz was considering a move, I think, chasing a more prestigious academic post somewhere, maybe on the East Coast.
And Vonnegut told him to stay put. Why?
His reasoning was that Klinkowitz was already highly valued and badly needed right where you are. He warned that if he moved east just for the prestige, life might actually become a lot less personal.
Less connected. Less meaningful.
Perhaps. It's the same core idea, isn't it? Whether it's Conwell in the 19th century or Vonnegut in the 20s, if you define your worth by external status rather than by how genuinely useful you are to the people right around you,
you risk losing something vital.
Yeah. The real acres of diamonds might be measured in local trust and genuine need, not just national recognition or a fancy title.
Okay, so we've looked at finding opportunity. Now let's shift gears to this second pillar, influence. How we interact in the public square, how we persuade. And this immediately brings up some pretty heavy ethical questions from the classical sources.
Definitely. You dive into rhetoric, and right away you hit this fundamental problem. Is being good at speaking, at persuading, is that inherently a good thing? Or is it just a tool, a technique that can be used for good or ill?
Quintilian really wrestled with this, didn't he?
He did. He pointed out that if you just define rhetoric as, say, the power of persuasion by speaking, well, then you've got a problem. Because lots of people persuade who aren't exactly paragons of virtue.
Like?
Well, he specifically mentions harlots, flatterers, seducers, people who use words very effectively to get what they want, but not necessarily for noble reasons. So persuasive skill alone clearly isn't enough.
That led others, like Aristotle, to try and define it differently.
Right. Aristotle saw rhetoric as the ability to discover all the available means of persuasion in any given situation. But Quintilian felt even that was incomplete.
Why?
Because it focused mainly on invention, finding the arguments, but it didn't really address style or delivery or, crucially, the speaker's moral responsibility.
So we arrive at the idea that true oratory needs virtue. It can't just be technique.
That's the argument, especially when you're talking about things like panegyric speeches of praise. The speaker has to be able to tell the difference between what's genuinely honorable and what just looks like it. Cicero went even further.
How so?
Through one of his characters, Crassus, he makes this really bold claim. Eloquence is one of the highest virtues. He tries to fuse the skill and the moral character together.
But not everyone bought that fusion, did they? Enter Socrates.
Ah, yes, the Gorgias dialogue. Socrates basically throws a wrench in the whole idea of rhetoric as a noble art. He doesn't see it as an art at all.
What does he call it then?
A knack. Something acquired by routine, by practice, but without any real underlying knowledge or principle. He calls it pandering.
Pandering, like telling people what they want to hear.
Exactly. He uses this brilliant analogy comparing cookery and medicine. Medicine, he says, is a true art. It aims at the genuine good of the body health. Cookery, on the other hand, just aims to please the palate. It provides gratification, pleasure, but not necessarily health.
So cookery is to the body.
As rhetoric is to the soul. That's Socrates' argument. It flatters the audience, gives them what tastes good emotionally, but it doesn't necessarily aim at their true moral well-being or understanding.
And this leads him to a pretty damning conclusion about who is most persuasive.
It's quite chilling, actually, especially today. He argues that an ignorant person is often more convincing in front of an equally ignorant audience than an expert is.
Because they know how to play on emotions and prejudices rather than dealing with complex truths.
Precisely. If rhetoric is detached from a genuine search for truth, it just becomes a tool for manufacturing consensus, regardless of facts. It's about manipulation, not enlightenment.
And this deep ethical concern culminates in that really challenging idea, the worse-off paradox. Can you unpack that? It seems so counterintuitive.
It really does. Socrates claims that the person who does wrong and gets away with it, escapes punishment, is actually the most miserable person of all.
Worse than the person who does wrong and gets caught, or even worse than the victim.
Yes. According to Socrates, yes. It only makes sense if you understand his core belief about harm. For Socrates, the greatest harm isn't physical pain or loss of property, it's damage to the soul.
The soul being like your moral core, your character.
Exactly, your inner self, the seat of your moral agency. When you do wrong, you damage that core, and if that core is damaged, all your future choices, your perceptions, everything becomes distorted. You're essentially making yourself morally sick.
So punishment then is like medicine for the soul.
That's the idea. It forces you to confront what you did. It might lead to repentance, maybe even some kind of correction or healing. But the person who escapes justice through clever talk or loopholes, they miss that chance.
Their moral sickness just festers.
Right. Leading them, inevitably, in Socrates' view, to greater unhappiness down the line, even if they seem successful externally. His ultimate point is stark. Doing wrong hurts you, the doer, far more profoundly than suffering wrong.
Because suffering wrong might harm your body or your wallet, which are external.
But doing wrong harms your soul, which is internal, and for Socrates, the most important thing you possess. The implication for anyone in public life, anyone trying to influence others, is massive. Power without moral understanding is self-destructive.
Wow. Okay, so bringing this high-stakes philosophy back down to earth a bit, how does it apply to the practical advice on speaking we find elsewhere? Even Conwell, focused on wealth, seemed aware of the risks.
He was. He had that great warning about using humor. He said something like, "It is easy to raise a laugh, but dangerous."
Why dangerous?
For it is the greatest test of an orator's control of his audience, to be able to land them again on the solid earth of sober thinking.
So humor, like Socrates' cookery, can be gratifying, but might distract from the real purpose.
Exactly. It can win over the crowd momentarily, but if you can't steer them back to the serious point, you've failed in your duty as a speaker, aiming to serve, not just entertain.
Cicero also had advice that seemed aimed at maintaining seriousness and depth.
Yeah, he talked about how, when discussing complex ideas previously handled by great writers like Ennius or Gracchus, you shouldn't just try to summarize them neatly.
Right.
He suggested using other words than the most appropriate.
That sounds odd. Why not use the best words?
His point, I think, was about respecting the depth. Don't just offer a glib summary that might make you sound clever, but actually diminishes the original thought. Use different phrasing to explore the nuances, to show you're engaging with the complexity, not just competing with past masters.
That connects to Quintilian's emphasis on the speaker's attitude, right? The emotional connection.
Definitely. Quintilian stressed that a good orator needs a large-hearted regard for the welfare of his audience. It's not just about logic. You have to genuinely care. And crucially, you need the skill to excite or assuage the emotions of mankind.
So eloquence has to have this emotional power, but guided by that care for the audience's well-being.
Yes, it's a powerful force, and it needs ethical guidance. Quintilian even gave practical advice on how rhetoric could serve justice, like arguing against the strict letter of the law.
How would that work?
He used an example. Imagine a law says a son who fails to show up to defend his father in court should be disinherited, a very strict rule.
Okay.
But what if the son didn't show up because his father told him not to, or because he was away serving the state in some vital capacity? The letter of the law seems unjust then.
So the orator's job is to argue
For the intention behind the law. The law was surely intended to punish genuinely unfilial sons who abandon their fathers, not sons who are obedient or serving a higher duty. Rhetoric becomes the tool to ensure that the spirit of justice prevails over a potentially blind and destructive literal interpretation.
using persuasion for a higher ethical purpose.
That's the ideal, yes.
Okay, so if public influence is that ethically complex, it really highlights the need for this third pillar, a strong inner core. And this seems to start with Stephen Covey's idea of proactivity.
Yes, proactivity is foundational in Covey's framework. And it's much more than just, taking initiative or being energetic.
What is it then, really?
At its core, it's a fundamental belief that your behavior comes from your decisions based on your values, not merely from your circumstances or your feelings. You choose how you act.
So you're not just a product of your environment or your mood.
Exactly. He talks about responsibility, the ability to choose your response in the space between a stimulus, something happening to you, and your reaction. That's where your freedom lies. Reactive people, he says, are driven by feelings, by circumstances, by conditions. Traffic jam, bad mood, boss criticizes them, day ruined, sunny day, good mood.
Their weather is external.
Right, but proactive people, they carry their own weather with them. Their internal state, their attitude, their performance, it's driven by their chosen values, not by whether it's raining or shining outside, literally or metaphorically.
You can hear in the language people use, can't you?
Absolutely. Reactive language is full of, I can't, I have to, if only, he makes me so mad. It externalizes responsibility.
Whereas proactive language
Is about choice. I choose, I prefer, I will, I can control my own feelings. It takes ownership. It's a shift from being acted upon to being the actor in your own life.
Covey even applies this to something as fundamental as love.
He does, and it's quite radical. He distinguishes between love, the feeling, that exciting, often fleeting reactive emotion, and love, the verb.
Love is an action.
Yes. Love as something you do based on a chosen value and commitment. It means things like sacrifice, really listening, empathizing, showing up, especially when the feeling isn't there. The action comes first, driven by the value, and often the feeling follows.
So how do you build this kind of inner strength, this proactivity?
Covey suggests starting small. Build what he calls inner integrity by making small commitments to yourself and then keeping them.
Like,
Simple things. Commit to getting up 15 minutes earlier. Commit to exercising for 20 minutes. Commit to not losing your temper in traffic today. And then do it.
and keeping those small promises.
Build self-trust. Little by little, he says, our honor becomes greater than our moods. You learn that you can rely on yourself, that your commitments mean something, regardless of how you feel in the moment.
That really resonates with Stoic ideas about the power of the will, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. You see Ryan Holiday discussing Seneca, for instance, reminding us that our will, our inner faculty of choice and judgment, is the one thing that external events can never truly touch. It's our ultimate internal power.
Our final trump card.
Exactly. And the Stoics believed you cultivate this power by preparing mentally for adversity, by practicing indifference to things outside your control, and by choosing cheerfulness and resolve even when things are objectively bad.
Seneca put it very starkly, didn't he? About the source of happiness.
He did. He said the truly happy life comes from believing that the only real good lies in what is honorable in your own character and virtue. If you believe that, then things like wealth, health, reputation, political favor, they become secondary.
Because they can all be taken away by fortune, by chance.
Right. If your happiness depends on external things, you're constantly vulnerable. But if your sense of well-being rests on your inner character, your virtue, then, in theory, it's unshakable. No external force can touch it.
We see a modern practical application of this kind of internal control in Tony Robbins' concept of reframing.
Yes, reframing is a powerful tool. It's about consciously changing the meaning you assign to an experience by changing the mental frame you put around it.
How does that work in practice?
We'll take a setback, like a project failing at work. A reactive frame might be, I failed. This is terrible. I'm no good. That leads to feelings of shame, maybe paralysis.
Okay.
A proactive reframe might be, okay, that approach didn't produce the desired outcome. What did I learn? What are the results telling me? How can I use this information to adjust my strategy?
So it's not failure, it's feedback.
Exactly. It shifts the meaning from a negative judgment on yourself to useful data for future action. It preserves your sense of agency, your ability to choose the next step, rather than getting bogged down in negative emotion.
And perhaps the most extreme and most powerful example of this kind of proactivity comes from Viktor Frankl.
According to Covey, yes. Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the Nazi concentration camps, is presented as someone who discovered and lived this principle in the most horrific circumstances imaginable.
What did he learn there?
That even when everything else was stripped away, his possessions, his professional identity, his family, even the basic control over his own survival, one freedom remained.
Which will...
The freedom to choose his attitude, to choose how he would respond internally to the suffering and degradation. He realized that his captors could control his body, his environment, but not his inner self, not his spirit.
And he chose to find meaning even there.
Yes. He chose to see his experience, horrifying as it was, as an opportunity to study human psychology under extreme pressure, to help fellow prisoners find meaning, to maintain his own inner dignity. And he believed this inner choice, this sense of purpose, was ultimately what helped him survive.
It's an incredibly powerful testament to that inner freedom. But building this kind of resilience isn't just about adopting philosophical principles, is it? It also involves dealing with our own psychological stuff, our vulnerabilities.
Oh, absolutely. Brené Brown makes this point very strongly, especially regarding things like shame. She warns that we literally cannot raise children who are more shame resilient than we are ourselves. Because shame, even unspoken shame, is highly contagious, highly observable within a family system. Children pick up on our deepest insecurities, she argues, like a parent's hidden anxieties about their body or money or not being good enough.
And that unspoken stuff shapes the child's own self-worth more than any direct lessons.
Far more, according to Brown. So if we want to foster resilience in others, we first have to do the hard work of facing our own vulnerabilities, our own shame triggers.
This also seems relevant to creative blocks, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Julia Cameron talks about this.
She does. She argues powerfully against calling creative blocks laziness. She says that's often inaccurate and deeply cruel.
What is it then, usually?
Often it's fear. Deep-seated fear, frequently stemming from past experiences of criticism that wasn't constructive but was instead dismissive, ridiculing, or invalidating. That kind of feedback shuts down the creative spirit.
As opposed to criticism that maybe points out a flaw but also offers a way forward.
Exactly. Cameron calls that criticism that provides a new and valid path. That kind of feedback can actually be energizing, sparking an aha moment, but the purely negative kind just reinforces the fear of judgment and leads to paralysis.
And Brené Brown also notes how hard it can be to let go of old coping mechanisms even when they're no longer serving us.
Yeah.
Like that Viking or victim shield she describes.
Right, that black and white worldview where you see everyone as either dominant or submissive, predator or prey. It's a stark way to see the world.
But it might have been necessary for survival at some point.
It might have been. For someone who grew up in a very threatening or unstable environment, developing that kind of defensive posture might have been crucial for emotional or even physical survival.
So just telling them to be more vulnerable or trust people isn't helpful.
Not usually, no. Letting go of a shield that kept you safe, even if it's now limiting you, can feel terrifyingly risky. It often requires a lot of support, understanding, and time, not just simple instructions. Building inner strength involves acknowledging and working through these deeper psychological realities, too.
Okay, so we've covered finding opportunity and the ethics of influence and the inner strength needed for both. Now let's circle back to the public sphere and look at how personal character plays out, particularly how leaders define worth. Theodore Roosevelt had some strong views here.
He certainly did, especially in the context of the rising class tensions of his era. His standard was very clear. Judge each person not as a member of a class, but on his worth as a man.
So ignore whether someone is rich or poor, laborer or capitalist.
Yes. He saw those distinctions, when used to create division or hatred, as fundamentally poisonous to a democracy. For him, the only valid distinction, the only real measure of merit, was conduct.
How you act.
How you act. Are you doing well and wisely, or are you doing ill and foolishly? That's the measure. He fiercely rejected political movements based on class hatred, whether directed upwards from the poor or downwards from the rich. Both were equally damaging in his view.
And he connected this idea of individual worth directly to the concept of liberty.
He did. He argued that true liberty isn't just about freedom from interference. It proves itself best when it's used to protect the rights of others, particularly minorities or the vulnerable.
So liberty comes with responsibility.
Absolutely. He explicitly warned against confusing liberty with the liberty to wrong others. Real freedom demands the active, moral engagement in safeguarding the rights of everyone, not just yourself or your group.
This focus on inherent worth, regardless of station or education, echoes powerfully in someone like Sojourner Truth.
Oh, absolutely. Her famous line, "I can't read a book, but I can read the people," speaks volumes. Her authority, her influence, didn't come from formal credentials. It came from her lived experience, her character, her profound understanding of human nature and injustice.
And her clear sense of purpose.
Undeniably, her declaration, "I must sojourn once to the ballot box before I die," shows that incredible personal will grounded in a demand for basic human dignity and rights. Her worth was self-evident in her personhood.
Now, bringing back that principle of service we started with, Vonnegut's advice to his friend Klinkowitz seems relevant again here.
It does. That advice to stay put because he was highly valued and badly needed right where you are, it reinforces this idea that true influence and perhaps true satisfaction often come from tangible contribution within a specific community.
Rather than just chasing status or a bigger platform somewhere else.
Right. It suggests that being genuinely needed, providing real service locally, might be more fulfilling and impactful in the long run than achieving some kind of generic prestige in a place where you're less connected, less personal, as Vonnegut put it.
We also see the complexities of defining service and influence in the evolution of Malcolm X's views.
Yes, his intellectual journey is fascinating. His later break from some of his earlier, more separatist and racially defined doctrines seems to have been influenced in part by wider interactions, like with white students who didn't fit his previous devil stereotype.
He started seeing more nuance.
It appears so. His later goals became more strategically focused. He aimed to raise Black consciousness and militancy, yes, but targeted it specifically against, as he termed them, overt white supremacists in the South and covert white supremacists in the North.
So not a blanket condemnation anymore, but a more specific critique of systems and individuals perpetuating injustice.
Right. It moved from a broader ideological stance to a more surgical, strategic, moral critique. It required more discernment, acknowledging the complexity of the society he was trying to change.
And when trying to exert that kind of influence, trying to change minds or systems, Roosevelt offered a crucial warning about tone and humility. This loops back to Socrates, in a way.
It really does. It connects to that idea of avoiding pandering, but also avoiding arrogance. Roosevelt made the very pragmatic point. No man ever thinks better of us just because we point out his flaws.
Probably true.
And similarly, he said, you won't win over another nation or group to a friendlier view if you adopt a tone towards them that you yourself would deeply resent if it were used against you.
Basically, treat others with the respect you expect, even when you disagree or are criticizing their actions. Lead by example.
Exactly. If you want to genuinely persuade or change someone, you have to engage with their inherent worth as a person first, even while challenging their conduct or ideas. Arrogance just shuts down the conversation.
Okay, so finally, pulling all these threads together, opportunity, ethics, inner strength, public character, we arrive at a kind of practical synthesis for managing it all effectively. Back to Covey and time management.
Yes, the Quadrant 2 life. This is about how you actually structure your time and focus to live out these principles effectively.
Remind us about the time management matrix.
Covey divides tasks into 4 quadrants based on 2 factors: urgency and importance. Quadrant vert is urgent and important. Crises, deadlines, pressing problems. Quadrant third is urgent but not important. Many interruptions, some calls, some meetings, popular activities. Quadrant fourth is not urgent and not important. Trivia, time wasters.
And quadrant 2.
That's the sweet spot. Important but not urgent. These are the activities that build long-term effectiveness, prevent crises, and align you with your deepest values.
Like what?
Things like building relationships, long-range planning, writing a personal mission statement, exercise, preventative maintenance, learning, preparation, things that are vital but rarely scream for attention right now.
And the problem is we get stuck in the urgent stuff.
That's the tyranny of the urgent. We spend most of our time bouncing between the crises of quadrant third and the noisy but often unimportant demands of quadrant third. Quadrant 2 activities, because they lack immediate deadlines, consistently get pushed aside.
But focusing on quadrant 2 is what actually makes the biggest difference long term.
Absolutely. It's proactive. It reduces the number of crises that pop up in quadrant 1. It clarifies what's truly important versus merely urgent in a quadrant third. And it builds capacity, vision, and resilience.
And the ultimate quadrant 2 activity, according to Covey, is creating that personal mission statement.
Yes. He sees it as your personal constitution. Like a nation's constitution, it should be based on enduring, correct principles and shouldn't change with moods or circumstances.
And it provides a standard.
A standard against which you measure everything else. All your major life decisions, your daily choices, your roles, your goals, they should all flow from and align with this core statement of purpose and values.
He even quotes Thomas Jefferson about the peculiar security that comes from having a written constitution for the country.
Right. And the idea is that a personal constitution provides that same bedrock stability and direction for an individual, especially when life gets chaotic or confusing. It's the ultimate anchor for proactivity. Hashtag tag tag outro. So if we try to weave all this extracted wisdom together, what does the blueprint for a well-lived life look like? It seems to require maybe 3 core capacities.
Okay, what are they?
First, you need that goal-oriented mindset combined with a focus on local service like Conwell and Nightingale suggested to actually recognize and seize the opportunities right in front of you.
Right. The Acres of Diamonds principle, but fueled by clear intention.
Exactly. Second, you absolutely need that Socratic sense of virtue, that ethical compass to ensure that any influence you gain is used for genuine good, for the health of the soul, not just for manipulation or pandering.
The moral dimension of action.
Critically important.
So.
And third, underpinning it all, you need that deep internal strength, that proactivity we talked about, the ability to choose your response, guided by values, no matter what life throws at you.
It really does feel like, all the really important stuff gathered together. When you see it laid out like that, it forces you to think, which part is the absolute bedrock?
Is it the drive for service-based wealth that Conwell champions? Is it Socrates' passionate concern for the integrity of the inner self? Or is it that daily, moment-by-moment practice of proactivity that Covey emphasizes? Where do you start?
That's a tough question.
And maybe the Stoics offer one final, provocative way to tie it all together, linking that inner state back to our initial discussion about wealth.
How so?
Well, Seneca, for instance, suggests that the truly happy person's wealth isn't external at all. It's their inner condition, their virtue, their tranquility, which is a resource that theoretically can never fail, never be taken away.
So if that inner integrity, that moral and emotional sovereignty, is truly untouchable by external fortune,
does achieving that state constitute the highest form of wealth, the truest kind of power we can possess?
more valuable than any amount of money or status?
Perhaps. What if real wealth, as Seneca implies, is simply having enough, reaching a point of inner contentment, a stopping point, which is something the person constantly chasing more external wealth might never actually find, always feeling unsatisfied, always spiritually, you could say, poor.
That intersection of inner peace and external striving, that's definitely something to mull over.
Indeed.
We have reached the end of this deep dive.